Okay.
The screen isn't flipped.
Wait, what is this? What are we even looking at here? What scene is this? Okay, whatever. Anyway, guys, we all through.
Yeah, we need to flip that.
Oh, I can do it on the fly. It's been Eid. We had a great time. Maria's reacquired her newfound illness of hay fever.
No, but it's gone now. Don't put that energy out there. It's gone now. It's gone now.
Listen, there's nothing that I'm going to stop. That's not. Nothing's going to stop me from blaming other externalities. Almost a full moon, so it's difficult for me to sleep. Okay, a little bit out of it. Our routine's a little bit out of it. But here's the thing, right? The difference between us and the average Joe is that we persist.
Mm-hmm.
When we are happy, we go. When we are sad, we go. When we are stressed, we go. When we are upset, we go. You understand? And one of these are today. Matter of fact, we're going to tackle a big one, you know. Fundamental one. In and out one. One love. One.
This is flipped.
One love. What? What do you mean?
It's the wrong way round. That is not that.
What is your obsession with flipping? Okay.
Flipping? I want it the right way round, that's all.
That's not how cameras work. Do you? Someone educate. Someone proliferate. Someone infatuate. Someone advice man it. Okay. I'm feeling nice today. I'm feeling nice today. It's kind of warm. Is it a heat wave? Is it a heat wave?
It's 24 degrees, but it's raining.
24 degrees. Come on, it drizzled for about a minute.
Look at the clouds.
It's always cloudy.
It was raining in town.
Was it actually?
Yeah, pouring.
That's £10 for the bank.
You still haven't given me
the
£400.
I realised as I brought this up.
That you owe
I'm in more
rats.
debt than you are.
Exactly. I heard your voice teeter out.
In-N-OUT. This is a.
Are you talking about the burger joint?
No, that's Whataburger. So.
It's really not. It's In-N-OUT.
In-N-OUT.
In-N-OUT is the famous burger place in America, in Los Angeles. Get rid of it.
So, let's define our position here. We're not creating something. Jesus Christ.
Keep going. Why do you stop?
We're not defining.
Is this mine?
Yeah, all for you. And it was yours. Well, it was Mum's, and then you took it, and then I claimed 3 of the 9 or whatever. We're not creating something new. We're not here trying to say, this is absolutely wrong, abolish it and bring it back up from the roots. What we're trying to say is, right now, we're in an incredible time period. Mm-hmm. We either slip back into war and into chaos and into starvation mindset and not starvation mindset,
survival mindset.
Scarcity mindset,
okay.
Right, where there's 1 apple and there's 2 of us and we're both hungry. So what kind of games emerge from that kind of reality? Those mindsets that are within us both.
Competitive.
Or we can say there's 1 apple here, both of us. We're kind of hungry. If we plant it, water it, look for food somewhere else, eventually we'll have a tree, and our children will be able to have a life of luxury or a life of abundance. So that's abundance mindset. So it has to do with the situation you're in, sure, but also the mindset of both people who are playing the game or who are humans that are interacting with one another. With that in mind, all this information is available to us via the internet, and we just want to bring it to one thing. So I was looking here for, information from the West, information from the East, and information from the East was saying, where do I end and where does the universe begin? And the idea would be, isn't it weird how I can take how I can take some food, that food can be outside of me. I can put it inside of me, and then it becomes part of me for a while. Right? Those atoms become part of me for about 7 years. And so usually the difference between the outside world and the inside world is where your sensation ends. So what factors into this is empathy. Empathy is projecting part of that sensation onto someone else. Now, of course, you can only feel within yourself by definition. But it's kind of like a proxy trick almost, that you focus on someone else and the feelings that they feel resonate within yourself. It's almost like you're expanding what is within you to other people. Now, if we look, one of the key things is scale. We've looked at scale already. You can scale out and you can scale in. The reason I love scale is because we have simple rules, and then you can stack them and apply them in different ways to try and visualize these ideas that we are facing. And if we can visualize them, we can tackle them a lot more succinctly. Right now in the media, Boris is doing all this stuff. The media is focusing on what's doing it. And so the media is part of the problem, because instead of they're focusing on what is being said as opposed to what's happening, because there's no clarity. So what's one of these examples? If you have a human being and you scale outward, that's a family. If you have a family and you scale outward, that's a community. If you have a community and scale outward, that's a society. You can apply the same but scale inwards. You have a human being, you scale inwards, you have organs. You scale inwards once more and you have cells. And that is, once you get to these fundamental levels, kind of like almost like a kind of the minimum and maximum resolution of scale, you start to bump into where this in and out is very valuable. So you zoom in into organs, you zoom in into cells, and you say each individual cell has a barrier. Mm-hmm. And there is a value to make a clear distinction between what's inside that barrier and what's outside of that barrier. Mm-hmm. Same with the organ, same with a society and its borders. You have a city wall, and it makes sense to define rules or code or ethics or land rights outside of that border and inside of that border. So you see that, for example, in international waters, or where you take a plane and you leave the land of a country and now you don't have to pay tax and things like that. You're inside, outside these different social, you use the in and out dynamic. And it's basically, it's a fundamental like everything else is. And because human beings are based on the life protocol, which is based on cells and mammals, I think it's not only fundamental in terms of intuitive to understand, but also fundamental in the sense of if we're in England and an English person writes a play, that play will be written in English. And because it's written in English, there will be some kind of meta structure to that play, no matter the topic, because it's written in English. And I believe the same is true with humans. Because we are in the cell form and because we're on the mammal form, there will be some things about our creation in terms of art or in terms of democracy that will have certain characteristics. And I think one of those characteristics is in and out.
Can you talk about how this relates to perspective?
I would say it relates to perspective the similar way that scale would relate to perspective. So you can zoom in and out of something, and that can then be your perspective. I have a zoomed in perspective. I have a zoomed out perspective.
But if I were to apply perspective, so in my head, what you're saying is true, but it's also, you're missing, I guess maybe I'm not explaining it properly. Considering the person, you have an inside perspective and you have an outside perspective.
Okay, so you're applying in and out two perspectives. Okay, that's interesting.
So the inside perspective would be what, from your understanding?
So I don't think I've been here before. So
okay, let's go back to the table.
That's interesting.
Okay, before we go down that path, where did you see this being used? beyond scale? Because it's very similar to scale when you
Mm-hmm.
spoke about it.
Mm-hmm.
So where did you imagine?
Okay. Well.
Well, actually, it's just I guess it's the comparison of within and without.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have a dude.
Long body boy. Caucasian.
Right. Now there's that which is within his membrane.
Yep.
And that's inside.
Yes.
And everything else from his perspective is outside.
Yes.
So let's try
but
to
it wouldn't
apply
even be necessarily from his perspective, right? Everything. Oh well. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. It's just that I could define that as well, even though I'm not him. But you are right. But I think it could just be clarified slightly because that stick is outside of you. I'm not you or the stick, but I can still make that distinction.
Yeah. But let's talk about it from his perspective.
Okay.
So what's the in perspective for him and the out perspective? So what is the in perspective from the self? That's all our thoughts. That is our perspective, right? That's the perspective that we occupy. That's the in perspective. Or is there more? That's why I just wanted to understand.
Let me mull that out. Let me chew the cud on that one a sec.
Okay.
And because I realize you're saying something, but just let me ruminate.
Okay.
And while I ruminate, I'm gonna say something else.
Have you got 4 tummies?
Feels like sometimes I've got half a tummy.
You eat so much.
I eat I eat inconsistently.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I eat a load, and sometimes I have to force myself to eat because otherwise I would like basically eat nothing.
So Hunter thinks he's getting flabby.
Getting what?
Flabby.
Flabby?
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got the same thing as Gargo. Like he tries to put on weight. Like Gargo, the tap you was eating late to put on more weight. I'm like, bro, that's the most unhealthy possible. Anyway. Like you're trying to rest, but your indigestion thing's still happening. But like anyway, okay. So in and out, a few things here.
And it is going to weaken the quality of his sleep.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah, jeopardizes his organs.
Which will make him fat. It won't make him gain the weight that he wants. Mm-hmm. He wants to bulk. He doesn't want to become fat.
So inside, one rule that I had, and you can challenge this, it's quite an old rule, is that structure, right? Because I was interested in geometric structure. I think this is something that's quite fundamental. It's aesthetically pleasing. Before the other day, we were looking at, I don't know if it was hexagons or pentagons, and then how we saw those rocks
naturally occurring.
And then you were like benzene, and it's like a biological compound, and that has the exact same geometric structure. Now, obviously, it was a depiction. It's not super accurate, but it's the concept that we're trying to say. And so this structure is really interesting. And if you look at proteins, they also are elements with a very specific structure. So the question is, where is structure created? So old me was like, structure is always created within. So if you have something that is a defined membrane, this membrane now...
But isn't the structure created when the in is defined?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. And so now that you have in, you can do things like halve it and quarter it, and you can have all these different kind of geometries and symmetries and things that are created. And then, okay, this is slight. I don't want to go too far here, but I just want to mention it, and we'll go back. I realize I'm going in the weeds a little bit. If we have 2, and we have in and out, right? This would clearly be in, and this would be out. And you said, okay, you give, yeah, exactly, yeah. You give a user, you say, this is in and out. How would you apply it to this? I think the vast majority of people would say that.
We haven't done T and U though.
Have
Keep
we
that in
not?
mind. No, we haven't.
Okay. Let me stop there. So then let me just.
But you can mention it. What was C and what was U, in and out?
So that's the thing. I think U is the ability to manipulate your environment.
So out.
So you think out, right? So that's one tick for out. But then U, what is more U than a city? I feel like a city is the antithesis of modern living. And cities are historically walled communities. They're in. Cities have laws and rules. Rules are structures. That's stability, that's structure, that's in. So I think when you sum all these things up, usually in is a more U and T is more out. And if you look at things like Burning Man or festivals where people gather in large fields outside, those are strictly T events. Sure, you need U in terms of electricity, logistics, poop, speakers.
Okay.
But the reason people are gathering is a T thing. People want to get together with people and dance together and be dialectic. So take a step closer to what we're talking about. Structure is created on the inside.
Again, the wording of that is a bit. Structures created on the inside and the outside. But structure is defined at the point of creation, which determines then whether something is in and out.
So, okay, let's have a look. Let's zoom back a few hundred years. You had the steppe. The steppe is basically the area between China and the West. It's like a Mongolia, like really flat plains where the horses used to run around because it was really flat. They could run around and get away from the predators and see the predators coming. And it was the domination of these horses that gave people who lived in that area, the most legendary in terms of Western mythology is the Mongolian, is the Golden Horde, right? They just came in with their horses and their bows and just came and destroyed everything and took everyone for ransom. They were more nomadic than the Western people at the time. Westerners were farming, which is a strictly in principle. You have to lock in one place, and then now you invest so much time in this one place, you have to defend it in some kind of way, because if an elephant comes and runs on your crop or eats your crop, you literally, your whole family could die. Whereas if you're nomadic and if they eat this crop, then you just go somewhere else. Probably kill the elephant. And if you look at these two ways of life, the nomadic way of life and the kind of sedentary way of life, which one of these two have more structure in terms of creation? Like, which one is more likely to create like a timepiece, like, in terms of a sundial? Which one is more likely to create like a record keeping mechanism? Which one's more likely to create bricks? Right.
Okay.
So of course, because they're still human, right? It's a human on the outside or a human on the inside, so they both create. It's a human on the inside, it's a human on the outside. They're both going to use utilitarian things. They're both going to create traditional things. But as a whole, I would argue the nomadic lifestyle is more out, and the sedentary lifestyle is more in. And as such, structure is more valued and then therefore more defined when you're sedentary as when you're nomadic.
I think I was looking at it from the human perspective, and because we don't really create structure within ourselves, it's created essentially the sort of ticker is at conception or whatever, right? When you're formed, you don't have any control over your bodily functions. It's just doing it. You're not out here saying, all right, boys, get to it.
But that's the thing. I think that's one thing that we should really explore a lot more. and if we can learn more about that, something that we can teach. Because I would argue, getting a little bit TMI, but it's not with the intent of being TMI. When you feel a certain emotion, right? Let's just say hungry. Okay, let's keep it PC. When I feel hunger, so I have this sensation in my body, and you're right. There's basically nothing I can do to, I can think about food and that makes me feel hungry.
No. I wasn't applying it to
Okay,
that. I was applying to like your kidney functions.
Okay.
Your kidney was structured.
Yeah.
You didn't have any say in that matter.
Okay. Yeah.
But I was thinking about it from the conscious and unconscious perspective.
But I think there is strong correlation between, I think Jordan Peterson, I think the fact that he was in the limelight and under so much scrutiny and so much hate from his opposition, I think that made his medical condition worse.
Yeah.
Even though not just his psychological condition, his physical body was in effect under more pain or in more weakness because of the situation that he faced himself in. So sure, we can't manipulate in the same way we can do to our finger, but I think
you think we
combined with our
subconscious
subconscious, combined with just automatic processes, we can affect a lot more than we think. People die of heartache. Like it's quite rare, but people genuinely, they're so heartbroken, they just die. And that's fundamentally against the body. The body never will kill itself. Right? It will always try and be survived, but the mind can try and kill itself, right? For example, the psychology. And so I 100%, what you're saying is true.
I agree with you.
But I think there is a little bit of the pie that we can explore where there is a bit of interchange and a little bit of overlap in terms of that.
Okay, yeah, I agree with you.
In-out structure, Santiago. So I was watching, or I was mainly listening because they were loud as hell, kids play. They were doing a water fight basically. Well, they had spud guns. What do you call them? Nerf guns. And I was, because that was kind of one of the most natural, raw forms of playing, right? Just a bunch of kids together. You give them a few tools, in terms of the little guns and water bottles and stuff. And they basically make the rules up as they go. And they pick the teams as they see fit, etc., etc. And one thing I realized was someone was saying, I think it was a girl, was saying like, let's make a base, or they're attacking our base, or our base is getting destroyed, something like that. And so with these social interactions that we're making, so this is more like level 2, level 3 on top of the rules, or in-and-out just being a rule, is what I envisioned, or kind of the symbiosis was, you have all these users, and they're all interacting with one another. And some of them will naturally put their focus on in, and some, that's I guess technically the wrong way, right? In. Some will naturally focus in, and some of them will naturally focus out. And the way that manifests is some people will try and create a base, some people will naturally create structure, rules, hierarchy. Some will naturally look outwards and be like, there's a group over there, I'm going to attack them, or I'm going to see where they are or where they're hiding, etc., etc. They're going to focus on the outside. So that's an emergent property of in-and-out. Okay, one last thing, and then I'll shut up. So if you have in-and-out here again, egg, you have, on the inside, you have the way of life. So I call this the way of life. Right. So I think you have a natural tendency, I'm making a claim, to be quite empathetic. And there are other people in the world who also have a natural affinity towards being more empathetic. If you killed all the empathetic people, the next generation, there will still be people who are empathetic. Just like if you killed, so there was this Christian who was like, what we should do, we should get all the gays and lesbians, put them in a big fence, put a big wall around it, and after one generation, they're all going to be dead, right? And everyone's like, oh yeah, it's true, they can't make kids. Right? Great, let's do it. Or let's be even more forceful. Kill every single gay person, every single lesbian person.
Mhm.
Guess what?
They're
The
coming
next
back.
generation
Coming
will be another layer.
Yeah.
Why? The simple explanation is it's the way of life, or a way of life. There's a natural tendency from within that emerges. You're empathetic, for example. Then you have the environment that you're in. Okay? If this environment is a city environment, I make the claim that if you're empathetic,
You lose.
right, naturally is the way of life, and your environment is in from the city, that this, so that worded it, there are more opportunities to thrive on the in versus out.
What's in and what's out in this
So in would
scenario?
be a city or a close-knit community, whereas out would be like a village, a farm,
Really?
in the bush.
I feel like in cities,
Well, bush, you might have a close-knit community there.
yeah, I feel like in villages you have close-knit communities because there are fewer people.
But so maybe I'm struggling to define it in a sense, and maybe in and out is simply too fundamental a thing to give clarity to this kind of phenomenon. So we need other tools in order
What
to make this.
phenomenon?
And that is, if I'm, okay, for example, Gargo, right? If we were to compare Armenia to the UK, I would say UK is more in, Armenia is more out.
Mm-hmm.
And from that dynamic, Gargo has killed a goat himself with his bare, well, not his bare hands, but he's killed a goat with like a knife or some shit.
Oh my god, are you being serious?
Yeah. Like it was a coming of age thing or for a ceremony, you know, to like,
Oh my
to like,
God.
yeah, to eat it, you know, not just to kill it, to eat it.
Still.
And that's pretty intense. And the idea is, if you're in a certain frame of mind where you're closer to the outside, the wild outdoors, right? Where what you see, right? Remember, the thing you're not looking at is in with the community. You're looking outwards to nature. What you see is bears going after this, and you see mountain cats going after that, and you see, you know, this insect trapping the other one and eating it. That's what you are focused on. That's what you observe. Then you're in a natural. Then you going out and getting a goat and killing it is more. It makes sense. It's more. It makes sense as a kill or be killed kind of world. This is simply the way of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you come there then with this empathetic mindset of, but they have feelings too, I was simply under the impression that it might work, but you have less opportunities to kind of cultivate that type of empathetic mindset. Whereas if your focus is on if your focus is inward, looking at people, and someone's getting bullied, and you say, he's a person too, you have more opportunities for that to be accepted and those people to kind of thrive.
So, okay, again, let's clarify what I was talking about. You've taken the extreme of one, which is you live as a barbarian, right? You live in the wild
bit
where
loading,
there are
but
like
okay.
bears and stuff trying to attack you.
Sure.
And so empathy in that context
Isn't as fruitful.
Yeah, isn't as rewarding.
Yes.
But if you take smaller communities in which villages, if there are fewer people, you know all your neighbors, you set up networks with your neighbors, and you understand that if you misbehave in this community, everyone will know, and you'll kind of be shunned. You'll be expelled from the community.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore empathy, because empathy becomes, or doing stuff for other people becomes currency, then it's very fruitful in smaller communities to be nice to people. Whereas in a big city, I can shove you on the street and kind of I'll never see you again. So there's no loss for me. Do you get what I mean? That's where the crime rate is much higher in big cities. People are ruder in big cities. People don't really get to know their neighbors, so they have they can kind of keep themselves to themselves. And so I'm not sure if you're in London and I'm like, guys, let's stop and hug. And people are like, I'm trying to get to work, mate.
Okay.
Right?
I accept this.
Okay.
I'm about to say something, and then you tell me where it fits in.
Okay.
When you're in a city, you are completely and utterly removed from the food that you consume. You don't know who made it.
Yeah.
You don't know where the seasoning came from.
Yeah.
You don't know where the oil came from. You don't know what the chicken, how big it was, what the type of chicken was. You don't know how old it was when it was killed. You don't know what it was eating. You don't know what medications were pumped into it. You don't know where it was killed. You don't know what factory it went through. You're completely removed from the food that you eat.
Yep.
You just see it as nug-nugs. So now you can have this empathetic mindset of, we shouldn't kill. We should be humane. We should, because all of the inhumane things that have happened outside of your perception. And everything within your perception is that of being pleasant to one another. So where does that fit into this idea of a big city life, me try to get by, where no one knows their neighbours and there's not as much ramifications for your action because there's not that tight-knit community?
Okay, so my understanding, again, I agree with your point. What's happening?
I think it's just getting a bit low on battery, but it's okay.
Oh, okay, we can charge it. Okay, so I think my understanding from what you've just said is there are spaces or there are pockets or big city life, the disconnected nature of it gives rise to negatives but also certain positive qualities in that from the negative, because everyone's so disconnected from not only their neighbors but also the things and where they come from. That gives rise to a potential effect of pointing out the negative and doing something about it. But that's like late stage city life.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. I guess that's where it fits in.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wait, what are we saying here? That empathy is... Are we trying to decide where it's most fruitful?
So if we say empathetic people is a way of life,
Okay.
was it the way of life, right? There will always be empathetic people, there will always be confrontational people, there will always be gay people, etc., etc. In which environments are those types of people most likely to flourish? And I simply made a quick assessment and said that when you have communities that are inward looking, when you have environments that are inward looking, that they are interesting. So is in focus? No, not necessarily. It can be, but not always. When you have a sheltered life, there are often more opportunities for that empathetic viewpoint.
When you have a sheltered life?
Yeah.
Why? What do you mean sheltered life? Sheltered from what?
It can be
from... You mean disconnected? What?
Well, you can be sheltered from the environment.
But
right, like when I'm cold and wet.
The introduction of the new word has just thrown me off completely.
When I'm cold, because right now we're in this house. Applying it before, we were applying it socially. Right now, I'm applying it more in terms of physically we're sheltered from the environment. It doesn't really make sense when it's warm like this, but if it was raining and cold, we would be sheltered from that. And when you're wet and cold, you're less empathetic. It's a natural state.
You're right. Okay, so that's one place it works. And also, you're more sympathetic. So I think commonality is unity, which gives rise to feelings of connectedness and empathy. Because we have a tendency of putting ourselves into someone's shoes. And it's easier with people who are similar to us, I guess.
Definitely. And
so if you're you're more likely to, so for example, you and I are both human beings, and I'm more likely to have empathy for you than I am a fly, right? And there are degrees to this.
Yeah.
So I'm more likely to have
Mammals.
empathy for, exactly. I'm more likely to have empathy for you, and then mammals, and then other, like anything with feelings, right? Because again, that's something that's similar to me. Okay, so you're right. In the in state gives rise to more empathy.
Or has more opportunities for it, because you can still have empathetic externally, right? You can be an empathetic hunter, right? You don't kill the first thing you see. You wait for a buck that is near the end of his age, and it's September and winter's coming, and you think, is he going to survive winter? He's probably going to die slowly of frostbite. I'll just kill him. It'll be a quick death, and the meat will sustain my family for the next year or whatever.
So they were like that. The barbarians. Did I tell you that the barbarians had a rule where they could kill animals, but if they shed an animal's blood needlessly, let's say if they shot someone or shot a rabbit and grazed it, they'd have to hurt themselves as well, because it was like an eye for an eye. If I've hurt him without purpose, even though there was intention behind it, it didn't matter for them, which I thought was really interesting. That was like they had a code, like a moral code that they lived by. So if they hurt either some other human or they hurt an animal needlessly, they'd shed their own blood.
Everything is an exchange.
Everything's an exchange. Isn't that mad? That's so interesting.
I mean, is it?
It's not interesting.
Is it not? So, okay, I don't mean what I'm saying, but I can't find a quick way to say what I'm saying.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind.
Okay.
Isn't that a colonialist mindset, that narrative that you're furthering?
What? The
use of the word barbarian and the idea that it's amazing they also had morals.
It's not that, it's because, so from my perspective, it was because we use the word, oh my God, that's such a barbaric practice. It's a complete rewrite of history. But then when you actually learn stuff about, and also earlier humans, would, I feel like the moral compass or so Peter Singer has this idea called it's called The Expanding Circle, his book, where he talks about this. And he talks about how as time passes, the people who we let into the circle of empathy seems to be widening. So before it was just people who were near us, so your immediate group, because we lived in groups, we never, not even necessarily biological family. It was just the people in your group used to just be your family. That's how we lived. And then we started living in communities, and now it's kind of just like all humans, kind of, or at least we pretend it is.
Yeah.
But then for a lot of people, as time passes, we're letting in more and more species. So we've started letting in certain animals. Dogs are protected by certain rights. Like you can't torture a dog. And so, but it's
you can't
also,
really torture anything that's a mammal, right? You could torture a fly.
You can torture a fish. You can torture. I mean, fishes aren't mammals. But you can torture.
No, they're
a fish.
not. That's right. But
I mean,
it's
some
getting
countries
there. You know what I mean?
But
Like,
you can't. Exactly, and that's part of the expanding circle.
Yeah.
And I think that's one that we get more information about. Actually, mate, they've got feelings too, right? So stop it. What you doing? And another thing is we learn more information about, okay, don't kill bees because they're actually incredibly necessary for our own survival. So part of it is from selfishness, another part is empathy. But so when you think about earlier humans, like the barbarians, you would think that they would have like a smaller circle than us. But this fact that they still had this level of respect, right, for animals and bloodshed especially, signals a very strong moral compass, right? So yeah, that's what I mean by isn't that interesting?
Yes.
That's why I found it really interesting.
And that plays into what I would like to say here, which is...
I'm just gonna sorry.
Okay. So now there's an interesting interaction. How you have out and in. In wishes to become out, and out wishes to become in. So I'll quickly do a little backstory. When I was, anyway, let me not out myself too much, but I was writing a little made-up story about this universe. And the way the universe started was, there was a god of feeling, and there was a god of sight. The god of feeling could feel all of existence, but couldn't see. And the god of sight could see all of existence, but couldn't feel. And their longing for one another is basically what they started to long for one another. And when they started to touch one another, that's the moment of creation. That's kind of when the universe started, like the Big Bang, basically. And okay. And then there would be primitive emotion was created then, like fear and da-da-da-da-da. And that emotion would then break down into more complex, nuanced emotions. So that's the universe that I built. And
who is it?
Backtash.
Oh, from the group chat. Sorry.
Looks like there's a it's going down in the DMs. There's group chat, probably memes getting flown in left and right. And so it's this. So the reason I say that is you have these kind of primal forces, in this case, in and out, and then there's an interaction between the two. And you can do that with basically any binary. And so with in and out, there's in wishes to become out. And I think that's quite easy to label as growth.
Okay.
Right? There's a reason why bacteria, if you give bacteria heat and food, it's not like, oh, I'm set. I can be like this for 1,000,000 years. The first thing it does is reproduce. The first thing it does is double and double again. The first thing it does is grow. And so that's the in becoming out, right? Because you're not growing inside of you're literally expanding into the environment.
So sorry. Keep that. Can you keep
that
thought for a second?
I can keep that for all day.
Okay. All right. So something that I want to add, which is if something threatens your fundamental worldview, you're not going to let it in.
And especially not initially.
You're going to shut it down completely.
Mhm.
And I've seen this happen with people where they're able to keep that, they're able to kick that for years.
Oh yeah,
For
keep the whole
years.
life.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
most people,
Oh yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And so you need, knowing that,
Yes.
I think becoming aware of that,
Yes.
I think has really helped me be like, what am I most resistant to
Yeah.
that can help me learn about stuff?
Yes.
So that's a fundamental resistance. Resistance.
See, this is the thing. You're so. So R used to be M. I think I remembered you showing those old notes.
Okay.
Is RM, is resistance matter?
What's the matter?
Exactly. What's the matter, baby? Because so matter would be when you look out, you have these rules and it'll make sense, but then you open your so when you
That was cute.
and so camera. If you look at the world in terms of frequency, from the primitive, like the fundamental level, it's beautiful. It's like I've solved the universe, right? Then you open your eyes and you're like, wait, what's this? That's calling this a frequency is so inaccurate. It's basically wrong. So there's clearly. So what I said then was when I'm pushing my hand in here, there's resistance to my hand. So is matter resistance? Are you simply resisting everything in a 360 degree space?
Okay.
But I could never really make it work. So R does not equal M. And then because of that, I threw it away. And you just brought it back in your own way, which is beautiful because that means there is something to it, right? It's not just one kooky guy in Little Sunny. You know, you've seen the value of resistance in yourself and the way you've used it to visualize simulate your reality and create awareness.
Yeah.
So let's put it in. We just need to factor it in a different way.
It's awareness. It's part of awareness.
Ooh.
It's an awareness tool. Just like jealousy is an awareness tool. There you go. Add it. You know what I mean?
So
and fear is also an awareness tool. What are you most afraid of?
So isn't this more about awareness tool than jealousy in particular?
Huh?
Like, shouldn't it be awareness tool and then from there we branch out?
Exactly. To resistance, to jealousy and fear. For now, there's 100,000 more.
Basically, it's almost every emotion, right?
Yeah.
Is awareness not part of this? How foolish of us.
Foolish.
And then that branches out into resistance.
I'm only sitting here, by the way, because I feel myself getting tired over there.
Okay. Thank you for your awareness. Jealousy, and fear.
Yeah. ... To be continued.
Yeah. Because what do you feel? Because there's a nuanced feeling, you know, when it's like, you know, you said you viscerally feel something's right. Sometimes you viscerally feel something's wrong. And that's often that resistance. It's because it's challenging one of the fundamental assumptions about reality.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I would call that. It's like a negative gut wrenching feeling. Right.
We'd have to feel it. We'd have to explore things and see where we face resistance and try to get a close understanding. But something Lila said the other day was really interesting. We were having
balance.
We were having conversations the other day in the car on the way to the walk. And one of the things that I noticed was when I say, like, and this is why sometimes I give up talking to certain people about certain things. Like,
absolutely.
With certain people in my family who I'm not going to name.
On live
I don't really talk about climate change anymore because their instant response when I'm talking is, yeah, I know, but. And Lila made a very interesting point about the yeah, I know.
Okay.
It's that they don't know.
Okay.
But that's a signal that they're not listening to you. They're not listening at all. They've already made up their mind and they're going to, they've locked in a narrative, right? And they're going to play that out and they're going to respond. So remember what was her name? Was it Elise? Rhiannon and Elise.
Oh, Rhiannon.
Rhiannon and Elise.
Okay, I think so.
and Elise. Was
Yeah.
it Elise? I think it was
I think
Elise.
so. Yeah.
And she said that with some people, she feels like it doesn't matter what she says, they're going to say the same thing. So regardless of whether she makes her point or says blah, 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 they're going to respond with the same stuff. And that's,
yeah.
and yeah, I know, is a
that
very
reaction?
good signal that a person's doing that. And I was like, that's so interesting. It's a signal that they're shut off. And so you should be aware of that when you're having conversations with people, and don't get frustrated, but just be aware that that's what they're doing, and you can do with that what you want, because you can point that out and say, I feel like you're in this headspace where I don't think we're having a conversation, you're just trying to convince me of your own opinion. You know what I mean? Or you've made up your mind, so I don't see this conversation really being fruitful, you know, rather than waste, because we have limited energy in our day.
So just as a quick aside, there's something I've been mulling over for ages, and this is where I want to bring it to the forefront. So 2 users here, kind of, you know, they're both in, right? So we're still right? And they give some kind of signal during the exchange between one another, right? This is the symbol for exchange is this now. You now realize, let's say you're not user number 1, you realize this individual, you are insecure about X, right? That's a realization you get from this interaction. Just as when they say, yeah, I know, but, you, so the narrative that you can say, you are not listening to me, or you have set your mind in a particular way, or you're just responding, all these different things that you can, and narratives that you can draw from that. We want to help people. I feel like I'm a healer by nature. And it feels the most direct way of doing that feels like through exposure to you, you've shown me that you have like a, let's say like a sore on your back. And what I should do is just point out, you have a sore on your back, and then you can apply ointment to it, or you can sleep in a way that doesn't hurt it, right? I'm helping you by addressing something about you. But I think the more that I've been mulling this over, the more I think that raw realization isn't for them, it's for you. And now you take this.
Would you wait. User 1 has the realization about user 2,
yeah,
and they don't tell them.
And they don't, that realization, that honest truth, if you're willing to accept that, isn't for them.
Isn't for user 2.
Isn't for user 2.
It's for user 1.
It's for user 1.
What, as weaponry?
So I think, if it's not always the case, obviously, but if you apply that raw truth to user 1, I think it's often weaponized. Remember when the lady commented on your TikTok, right? And you condensed something, you made a few mock videos, you condensed some of the things down, and I was like, ugh! Why was I like, ugh! Partly because of the emotion, but also because the thing you were saying was spot on. It was right on the money. So there's an element of truth to that. There's an element of direct certainty. You're pointing at the elephant in the room or whatever, right? But when you said it, it was weaponized. When you said it, it wasn't useful for them to consume.
Yeah.
And so through the iteration and through the mind mapping and visualization tool, we were like, okay, this is the feeling, this is the realization about them. And then now, after mulling it over, after having this feedback into yourself, maybe a few times, then you get, let's say we call this whole thing N. You have like N times T, or where T is circulations, and then this is actually the solution that you provide to user 2. So I think that's something that feeds into exactly what Lila and you were discussing. So you talking to a family or anyone and hearing, yeah, I know, but, and saying, what that means is you're just reluctant to, I don't think that's, it might be useful. Again, there's always exceptions. It might be useful in that. Maybe it's the clarity that you need to cut through all the BS or whatever. But I think generally speaking, you say, oh, you're resistant to the So either now you can make a decision. Do I try and address this now in a different way? Or do I try and address this in the future when you're in a different state of mind or in a different environment? Or do I just let it go?
I'm doing it, and I let people come to me. So the other day when we climbed up Pendle Hill, right? Because my cousin, she'd eaten too much, so she couldn't come up with us. So she was sitting behind a wall, just in the shade, right? Because it was really hot that day. And I ran down to sit with her, right? Because I like running down mountain. I can't bloody run up, but I can run down. And so I sat with her, and you asked me the other day, how are they in terms of like sustainability? You know, headscarf, woman, you know, down the.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but I don't remember saying sustainability.
No, we were talking. You asked how is she with like fast fashion.
Oh yeah,
right?
you said she likes. No, it wasn't.
She doesn't.
Wasn't it? Wasn't it retail therapy we were talking about?
No, you asked what is she like with fast fashion, and I said that when she goes on holidays,
she loves buying stuff.
She likes buying stuff because that's her way to show affection.
Right? Yeah.
So then I, with her, and in the past I would have been like, that's disgusting, you're horrible, you're going to hell, mate. Now I just kind of sit there. People know where I stand, and also I don't want to be a constant Debbie Downer, because I feel like you can be sometimes if you're constantly pointing out people's flaws. It's just like, bro, I'm trying to live, right? So I just leave people alone, and then when the opportunity arises, right?
And what do you do?
So she said something about, because we were looking up, and I said I like looking at chemtrails because I like it because it reminds me of parts, and I like to visualize it because you see the the energy dissipating across time. And so we were she was lying like this and I was lying like that, and we were both looking up, and she was like, I don't like those, and I was like, why? She was like, look at the amount of pollution. And I was like, nugget. Rude, I see you. And I was like, and then I asked her, I said, when you fly, do you carbon offset? And she was like, what's that? And then I told her about it. And then she was like, oh, you can do that? And I was like, yeah. I said, I'll send you the link. And then she was like, could I plant my own tree? I said, I think they plant, because they plant quite a few seeds. They plant quite a few trees for every time you travel. And I said it's quite cheap. It's like for a return trip to Pakistan, it's way less than £1 a tree. It's for like a return trip to Pakistan, it must be like £20. It's very cheap to carbon offset. And I've done this to 2 people. And see, just introducing that idea, I think in that moment was enough. I wasn't going to convince her to go vegan and never travel again. You know what I mean?
Exactly, yeah.
But yeah, we had a little conversation. It was nice because I kind of got to see where she was at in her head. And it was really interesting that her first thing about that was pollution. Right? And so even someone who's quite disconnected from the idea of or not involved in the movement, or isn't really part of that environment in which people around her are talking about it, it's very interesting that despite that, she's the one that brought it up. And so, yeah, so that kind of relates to like learning from the past about accusing people of being horrible murderers, and
which isn't incorrect.
Exactly. But then picking and choosing your battles is also incredibly important if you truly want to make a change. If you just want to feel better, then just accuse everyone of everything. You can stand on your high horse until that horse is dead, literally, then get a new horse, right? But if you truly want to help, nuggets, man, wait for the little roots to show, or the stem to grow from the soil. Shoot. It'll come. It comes in weird ways. Like Sai, when she told me that, because of me, they started eating less meat. Yeah, which is like, what? Where'd that come from, mate? I'll take it. So, yeah.
Nice. That's beautiful, dude. Okay, so we'll take a step back from awareness because that's a new fundamental. We'll get to that.
Yeah. And it's probably one of the biggest fundamentals because
Yeah.
it branches off into so many things. And I think we should wait for awareness, for leave it nearer to the end.
Okay.
Because I think it's kind of all encompassing. Yeah. And I want to spend some time on it because I think that could lead to a bunch of tools.
Yeah.
I think awareness is a great place to start because it doesn't have to be in real life. We can create videos about how to increase your awareness, and these stories and stuff is quite a good way to do it.
In terms of awareness, one out from awareness is resistance. I think if we apply resistance to the emotional field, I think resistance is naturally seen as discomfort.
Yeah.
And you can use that
it manifests itself as a discomfort. Yeah.
Or we categorize it as discomfort. So I'm resistant to do a speech. Why? Because I don't like talking in front of people. Why? I've never liked it. Why? How do you feel when you talk in front of people? I feel nervous beforehand. How do you feel when you do it? I feel like I'm stupid, or da-da-da-da-da. It's emotions that they're labeling as bad. Whereas, remember the thing where it's like, I'm anxious, or are you just excited? They're very similar emotions, right? And sometimes when the emotions, I'm not saying every emotion is the same, you can just trick your mind, but with certain emotions, when they are so similar, if you just say the right narrative, basically, you can switch over into one thing. It's like when a kid falls over, and then they look at you, and you go, and they go,
yeah.
Or you go, are you okay? And they're like,
It happens with cats as well.
What?
Like people do the thing they did with babies where they pretended they hit their heads and babies cried. They did that with cats, and cats also started reacting in a similar way where if you panic, they're like they freak out. Yeah.
Oh.
Isn't that it's cross species? That's wild. I mean,
but it's kind of it is crazy.
A fly and
it is crazy with cats because they're solitary killers. So it's amazing that even they can feel it, you know. Like they're meant to just be loners that go around hunting stuff all their life.
Maybe it was one cat. Maybe I'm completely overselling this. Maybe it was one person.
But lions, right? Lions are more social.
Yeah.
They're more social. Tigers are, jaguars are way more social.
Look at Toffee, she's so social.
She's
depressed that her buddy died.
Oh, and he wasn't even really a buddy. Just a guy that was around her entire life.
Exactly. Her dad.
Aww.
Kind of a dad.
Kind of an uncle. So, in wishes to be out.
Okay. What? Okay.
And I've labelled that as growth.
Does in wish to be out, or does in wish to expand? And out wishes to expand. Now, the rate at which either does is the battle between the two.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, because that was a bar. But I feel like it's not what I'm putting down.
It is. Because I'm disagreeing with your frame, because in can't be out by definition. So what it wants to do is encompass out.
Wishes to.
No, but it doesn't want to be out. It wants to encompass out.
Semantics, no?
Sure.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, it wants to make the outside in.
Yeah.
By encompassing it.
Yeah.
Getting another.
So it doesn't wish to be out. That's what I mean.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean?
Because out is still out, and it wishes to be in. It just wants to take more in by expanding out.
Yeah, exactly. By expanding, by engulfing. Out.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's what you mean by we want to grow.
Yes.
Life wants to grow.
Yes.
And that it encompasses, yeah.
And that's why I said a growth line expansion. And I think that, again, because we're in and out, and you can apply this to the cellular level. And then I think things that happen,
does
events.
Does out want to become in?
Let's wait for a millisecond on that. large events are usually when waves line up with one another, right? So if you start humming, right, that there was like a resonance that we felt.
I could only hear my own.
You couldn't feel the resonance more when we did it, when we both did it.
Do it again.
No, try and go higher and lower until you find the frequency that I'm on. Maybe we can't do it here, but you've definitely done it with a vacuum cleaner before. When you're vacuuming and you start going the same frequency as the vacuum cleaner, right? So there are two frequencies where the high is the high and the low is the low, right? And you have that in economics. You have economic cycles, you have debt cycles, you have business cycles, season cycles. And when they coalesce, bam, then the boom happens, or then the recession happens. Usually, right? Things can just peter into it. But what I'm talking about, these big moments that happen, it's usually when things align. And so on the cellular level, you have in and out wishes to expand. On the human level, or you want to expand. On the social level, on the family level, you want to expand. On the social level, you want to expand. So you have all these alignments. Well, it wouldn't be the same. Well, you can have octaves which are the same. But anyway, you have all these frequencies that have alignment, expansion, right? So now to say, because it is a solution that's simple, we just slow down. Maybe rule number 1: don't fuck another guy's money up. Is it really so simple we just slow down, right? If we fundamentally must expand, to simply be like, stop, it's literally like standing at the front of a beach frontier and watching this tide come in and being like, stop. It basically has the same effect. Get a bucket, and that will also have the same effect as just saying stop. You're not going to stop this tide coming in. You're not going to stop the desire for life to expand. Right, just as you're not going to stop the desire for bacteria to expand and mold. Oh, mold is in my room. Stop. Right, it's not going to happen. It's going to keep doing what life does. And so, because of that alignment, because of that harmony that transcends scale or aligns through scale, we need to find ways for that growth to manifest in a way that has less impact on the environment, but still feels like growth. And that's what the lady was saying on Twitter, was that the digital NFTs and digitalized space is an area where businesses can expand, but they're not physically expanding, they're digitally expanding. So at least that expansion is offset in terms of the environmental impact slightly. Okay, sorry. So your thing was out becomes in becomes out. Can you remember what you wanted to say?
I was saying that I said
does out wish to become in? I think is what you said.
That was the latter point, yeah.
So if I were to say in wants to expand outwards, if we don't want to say wishes to become out, because I think it is technically right what you said. In wishes to go out. Like, how would you say it in a maxim that sounds sleek and short? You know, because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words, which is quite succinct.
In wants to engulf out. Or in wants to expand outwards. And out wishes to expand inwards. They both want to expand. And what I said earlier was that rate at which either of them do that is the battle between the two. So if we allowed these trees to grow for long enough, at some point they'll come through the windows. Right? It'll become so big and it'll want to grow that it will encompass this whole house. It'll break through a window and it'll start growing into the house and out of the other side. And it'll keep expanding, right? And that's the battle between the two. If we applied enough pressure with water and our skin, it would permeate our skin. And that's the battle between in and out. That's what I mean. Because they both want to grow. To say that out wants to grow is misleading. I mean, to say only that in wants to expand outwards and leave it at that.
No, here. So the green line is out, the red line is in. So I said out, I've changed it to expand, out which is to expand in.
What seems to happen is the battle for in seems to be growing
From out to in.
from in to out, in expanding. That seems to be winning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now I think we need to make a distinction
And that's
here
the
to be
growth
more
of
precise.
a child as well. Huh?
We need to be more precise.
Mm-hmm.
The house, it's always been useful to make a distinction in groupings between inanimate objects and life.
Can you move this chair, please?
Between inanimate objects and life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were talking about the trees outside permeating the house,
Mm-hmm.
the house is a shell, is in,
Mm-hmm.
and the trees are outside of the in.
Mm-hmm.
And the trees, if given enough time, would go inside.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we can be more precise in the frame that we create or the landscape that we create in terms of, are we talking about life to life, or are we talking about inanimate objects to inanimate objects? Because land can expand through tectonic movement. Land can contract, or islands can go back.
My brain's actually going wild right now. Literally. I was just thinking, out will win that battle without intervention.
Well,
and the reason that in is winning the battle is because
out will win the battle, did you say?
Out.
Yeah. It's there's more out. There's
way more
out. Yeah.
Than in.
Yeah.
And the reason that in seems to be winning the battle, one, because we're looking at it from the human perspective,
society's perspective,
but also because humans manipulate. Is it dead? No, it's on. Is it dimming? It's flashing green.
Not on.
It is, but they're both flashing green. What does that mean?
Okay, it's almost out actually.
Okay, alright.
Keep going.
Alright. The reason human beings manipulate their environment to do the conversion of out to in on a larger scale.
To do, from out to in, exactly, out to in. Sometimes depends what you're doing. If you're erecting a wall, you're making it out. But yeah. If you're going and taking a rock and you're bringing the rock and you're like, I would say making out in would be going to a mountain, mining the ore, and turning it into a ring and giving that ring to someone you like. That's out in.
I think building a wall is making out in. This was out and it's now become in. This used to be out. The fact that they've erected these bricks into walls turned outside in. It's the same air. It's the same land. We've turned the outside into inside. That's what I mean by out in. The tree penetrating would make the inside out. At some point, all of this would get encompassed. If we left it for long enough. Like you see that when they're discovering cities in Amazon.
Yeah. And there's just like forest, like meters of forest.
But there were buildings there before. But the moss and trees and vines and roots have just encompassed everything, making the inside out. The reunification. Out wants to unify. Out is Germany.
So this is really interesting. What you just said is out wishes to unify.
Is in utilitarian. Huh? Now I understand why in is utilitarian. In its entirety.
Well, as a sum, it's like, 60-40. That's usually how it is. It's not like 100%. It's just like who then it is team. Yeah.
It's very because when I was the moment at which I said my brain is going wild right now was when I was thinking human beings manipulate their environment, make outside in. That's utilitarian. It's usually for a utilitarian purpose. It's for a reason. To an end. You don't just make the outside in without an end.
You're in a wild place right now. I will. What you said is out wishes to unify. I think both of them wish to unify. The inside, so no. The fight against it, channel it. The inside wishes to. Okay. When you drink cold water.
We have small clusters which turn into larger cities, which turn into countries, which turn into the United States.
Yep. So that's a social, a zoomed out scale perspective.
That's in unified.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in unified.
Well, you could say it's out unified. Hang on, before we go down the rabbit hole, let me start with my example that was clear cut. Okay, if you drink cold water, it can feel refreshing or whatever, right? Before you can actually absorb that water and the nutrients and the minerals in that water into your body, it first needs to be warmed up to a temperature that your body can actually use it with. Because it can't just take something that's too different. You know how you said it's easier to empathize with things that are similar? I think that's a fundamental property. Things exchange easier when there's less differential between them. Or yeah, basically. And so, same. I'm hungry and I'm over focused. ADHD over focused.
Oh my god, no! I could carry on like this all day, but I'm hungry. Tell someone to bring us food.
And do some push-ups.
But we need to
charge these.
Oh, mine's gone.
Oh, I still got a little bit. Okay, so all I want to say. All I wanted to say is. Oh, what was it? Yeah. Really care about it. That is a well-written song, mate.
That's a great song.
All I want to say is they don't really care about us. So that's the in wishes to unify. Yeah. Well, some of his songs, not all of them. Not all of them. Especially not when he was Jackson 5. Oh, baby, give me one more time. Okay. Usually the big bangers, not one person wrote it. It's usually the anyway.
Eminem wrote that.
Yeah, but Eminem's different, bro. You're real one with a pen. Okay. Out. Shut up, please. Please.
Sorry, go.
Before it dies. Out wishes to unify. So in that there was an example of in wishing to unify. Everything must be 35 degrees Celsius before we start doing our biological processes. Outside wishes to unify, right? So if we had this thing here and we had a space within it, entropy would say, spread it equally amongst everything, right? Why have we got this concentrated area here of heat and whatever matter? Spread it perfectly across the entire space.
But when that happens, in becomes out.
I told you this was a big topic, guys. What did you say to me? When that happens, in becomes out. No.
Entropy is the collapse of structure.
Well, no.
Get out of my house. Literally what you said.
No. It's the collapse of in structure, right? You know, structure is created on the in, but it's unity. It's unity. Okay, so unity isn't structure, is what you're saying. Well, it is. Like, let's say you had one ball of energy.
Structure. Bro, if everything's structure is nothing structure, we need to have a tangible. Okay.
Okay. Sure. Okay.
Entropy is the loss of structure.
Sure. Go on.
And so that example doesn't work. In when it entropizes, or whatever the bloody word is, becomes out. It's no longer in. If it expands, that's not entropy.
No, that's not entropy.
Right? That's just growth.
Yeah.
And that's the rate at which in becomes, or at least in an outside structure. But then even us over time, when we experience entropy, it's the breakdown of us, right? It's when we die. It's the loss of the self to the environment, right?
Okay, we're still going.
Yeah, I'll tell you.
I just thought maybe when one's not working, but everything's working for it.
What are we talking about? The unification. Out unifies.
So that's what I think I meant by structure.
Okay.
Is, let's say we have sand in a thing, right? And we put just a lump of sand in the middle. And then over time we had a bit of blow it a little bit, shake it a little bit. Eventually, if we do that enough, if we put enough energy into the system, there's basically going to be a layer of one grain layer of sand across the whole area, right? Let's imagine that's the maximum size. It's not going to have clumps. And that's what I meant by structure. But what really a better word for structure is unification. Is that there's a unified, I was going to say structure, but there's a unified form of sand. But then you said in is out, but that's not in is out. Well, no, in being spread equally. Is out. I don't see how that works. I thought that's what you said.
In becomes out.
Okay, what's the difference?
Or into out. What is in is out? I don't know. In is out means.
Let's go up a little sec. Here, you have in, right? Defined by the membrane. Green arrow going outside of the membrane. In wishes to expand outward.
Yeah.
We define that as growth.
Yeah.
Then, opposite tool, if something's going out, then something should probably be going in. Out wishes to expand in. What the heck? I literally put question mark. What do we call that? Is it maybe it's a misapplication of the opposites tool?
But out does wish to go in.
And what are the properties? What are examples of that? What do we call it?
But that's also growth.
That's also growth.
Of course it's growth.
Are you sure it's not heterorog?
You try to call this guy, he looks shit, right? It's growth.
No. Be careful here. This is what I'm saying. You're pointing outwards of the house. I think we're not being clear. You're pointing outwards of the house and pointing to trees which are in.
No, they're not.
They're not in here.
Yeah.
But they're, from the tree's perspective, they're in growing.
Yeah, but they're also growing.
But I think there's a difference between two things going out competing with one another, like two different bacteria in the same petri dish, and bacteria in an expanse of space. And I think that's what out is. Out is space. Out is like the absence of almost.
It's not the absence of.
Not
By
quite.
definition, it's everything from a particular thing's perspective that isn't within its memory. So if a rule can be applied to in and out, it should be applied to this house and the tree.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah. So that's why I'm working from this perspective. If it makes life harder for us,
I think it is.
That's good.
No.
Of course it is. Because that means that any rules we come up for space and everything else can't be applied from this perspective. And then what's the point of calling that in and out when it can only be applied to space and the absence of stuff and stuff?
No, it's not. Space is a key characteristic to out. You said there's always more out. You said out will win because there's always more out than in.
Okay.
And what is one of those fundamental things that is more out than in? There's more space outside than inside this house. There's more air outside this house than inside this house.
So the reason that out wants to come in here, if this was a vacuum, it would come in.
Yeah.
Because of diffusion.
Yeah.
Because it wants to reach
equilibrium. Yeah.
That only applies to space though, really.
Okay.
Not in its
So by
entirety.
space, I don't mean a vacuum space in space. I mean this kind of space is what I meant.
Yeah. I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay, let's do this.
Scenario now, but...
Because the thing is, we're working with a life matter and a non-life matter. Okay. And I think that's a particular type of situation. I'm not saying it's wrong, I think that's a particular type of situation. We also have life and life matter, and we have non-life and non-life matter. Okay. And if we have a non-life matter, and we imagine that this box is the Sahara Desert, and we have a clump of sand here, and then we have some wind, and we all this sand is going to unify. All this sand is going to have an equal flat layer, basically, with slight deviation. There's not going to be one in bulk. There's not going to be a cluster of sand anywhere, really. It's all going to be unified, pretty much. So that's an inanimate situation of in and out. That is all.
All right.
So I think that's, when you look at it that way, when you look at it this way, the conclusions that you make are slightly different than when you look at it this way. When you look at it this way, you say, out, all that's happening. What's happening here is that tree is expanding into our space. That's light. Whereas the sand, how can you really say the sand is I guess you can say the sand is expanding into the space. Why not? In this example. But that's what I'm saying. The unify. That's what I'm saying. But I think out has a unification principle into it, like baked into it.
Given our definitions, or it just does.
I think it does. Yeah.
So then, inanimate things aren't out.
I mean, where is it? It depends where it is. Right, so have you heard of heat death? The idea of the heat death, where you basically have every single atom is equally spaced across the universe, and there's just like one atom and then nothing, and then one atom, and it's just like everything's just, there's no heat, everything's just perfectly spaced, everything's basically next to 0 Kelvin. That's how the universe ends, in a sense. And well, then nothing, because everything's just in equilibrium, in a sense. Everything is every atom is perfectly scattered, just like all the sand is perfectly scattered. There's no, like, life is an imbalance. I'm warmer here than my environment. I'm wetter here than my environment. I'm more salty here than my environment, etc., etc. And so life requires that differential. And over time, due to entropy, that differential will be scattered across, out. So that's just the idea that I wanted to bring up, that I thought that this life, non-life example was not quite addressing. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying from my intuitive understanding of in and out, that's part of it. So how do we factor that in? And how do we factor into that?
What's part of it? Let's talk about a particular thing. Tell me what's part of it.
Like the heat death example.
Okay.
That you have this kind of entropy feeling, like you have a cluster here of a cell or energy or a planet or whatever, life, and then over time this thing happens. Like you said, when we die, we kind of go back to the soil, right? We like dissipate again, dust to dust. So like that process is unique to out, I feel like, and is fundamentally different to in.
It's not. It's the unification of in and out. Right?
Okay. So you're calling it unification?
The unification of in and out, yeah.
I mean, I do like the word unification. It's kind of bang stuff.
But that's not the out wishing to become in.
No, I think
that's the end. Yeah, you're right. What are you doing? You're doing so well.
Well, it's the same. It's the same. It's just unification.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's just the F is now pointing that way. The C is doing it that way. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
So you think that's what I was talking about? I was talking about the unification of in and out, and what you were talking about was out expanding into in. So one man's out. Wait, one man's in is another man's out. Is that what you're saying? It's all just relative. This is in for us, but for the tree, it's out.
Yeah.
And we just leave it as that.
For now. It's like, okay, tell me why. Are you looking for a nugget? Are you looking for a nugget?
So I've opposite tooled this because I feel like in expanding outward, calling it growth, I feel like everyone's gonna be like, yeah, obviously, which is what I look for. That means it's definitely a thing, basically, right? That's really something really fundamental we can work on. And so then I was like, opposite tool. If that thing that we kind of guarantee is a thing, if we can opposite tool it of out going in, what is that thing? So yeah, I'm looking for a nugget. It might not be there. Maybe it's just in, out, and then we have unification, and then that's just a property. So you have in going out and unification.
You have out going in as well. So.
But you said out going in is growth.
So that's for living things.
Yeah.
For non-living things, out wishes to reach an equilibrium. And so if there was a flat plane,
Yeah.
and you had sand,
Yeah.
that was just lying in a pile, if nothing happened to that, like if there was no outside intervention in that, it was vacuum,
yeah,
it would exist in a pile, but that's not how the universe works. Across time, however, I would bet that pile would become a flat line on top of the earth because of wind,
rain,
atmosphere, rain,
shudders,
whatever, yeah, blue, all of those things. I think it would become flat. So that's it reaching equilibrium. That's the heat death thing.
Yeah,
I guess,
exactly.
is equilibrium.
But that's unification.
That's unification.
That's not unification.
Unification isn't that.
What's unification then?
Equilibrium is right now. There's air pushing in.
Yeah.
There's whatever's blood pushing out.
Yeah.
Water pushing out.
Yeah.
All your organs being like, let me out. Moving. Right? That's equilibrium.
Yes.
Unification is you die. You go back into the earth. That's unification. That's not equilibrium. What? It's a new equilibrium. But it's a new equilibrium, but it's not unification. This is unification. You haven't been united.
Okay.
Unification is heat death. It's the end.
Okay.
Unification is this is a vacuum. We open the windows, all the air comes in.
Yeah.
Unified.
Yeah.
Outside pressure has been, or let's say there was a massive wall in between the atmosphere of that side, and we open the window, it would be like met again. If the Koreans basically were to be like, you guys can talk again, that would be unification. Whereas what's happening right now is just equilibrium, right? Am I right?
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
So that question mark, come up and write it down.
Out wishes. So it's different. It depends on. So if it's. See, does the tree coming in here, is that equilibrium?
No, it doesn't seem like it.
That's growth.
That seems like the in tree is expanding. It seems like growth.
And is that the out wishing to? Is that the out wishing to? No, the in wishing to expand, wishing to grow.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yeah.
But that's
because it's life.
From their perspective.
Yeah.
From our perspective, it's the out wishing to become in.
Is this the like 2-2-2-2 thing?
No, it's about perspective. So from their perspective, from our perspective.
So from out, what about from out's perspective?
What?
Okay, we just can't. So we can only have the in perspective as human beings, as life, as things that exist within in. We can only have the.
Let's try. Say that again.
What's happening from the out perspective?
From the out perspective, there are things that are upsetting its equilibrium.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Or changing its equilibrium. There are conditions that change its equilibrium.
Like a cave would be in, a natural in. A natural inanimate in. And out might be many things, but out might be the rain, and the rain can't get to it. Or, you know, like a lake. The lake's higher than the ocean. All the water wants to be at the lowest points.
Okay. From out's perspective, in is disruptive.
Okay, yeah.
Because if we consider a space to be out, when I move around, I disrupt time. I disrupt space.
Yeah.
Right. So is that what you mean? In is disruptive from out's perspective.
Interesting. Sure. So the box thing is an attempt at perspective, a symbol for perspective. And the round one is creates. So from out's perspective, in is disruptive. Sure, yeah. That seems to make sense.
And what about from in's perspective? What is out?
Void.
Unknown.
The unknown. Yes, the unknown. The thing that can give you untold riches and untold danger.
It's uncertainty, right? Or unknown.
Unknown links to uncertainty, uncertainty links to fear. Lots of resistances about fear. Fear is a resistance emotion.
Which one needs it all back together?
Right, we need to charge this. I need to suck some air, wash some dishes, cook some food.
Suck some air, is that what you said? What's that mean?
Like go outside and get some fresh air.
Is the outside in?
Ooh! So I think we've still not fully put a bow in this though.
No. We need step away, come back.
Okay. In and out, boys and girls. Where is she?
We also need the.
There you can see a stick.
We need to figure out in what way this is tangible. Approximately in the town of tangibility, I would prefer sticking with the town of tangibility.
Okay, that is your favourite place to be. All right. Thank you so much for being here.